Thank you, thank you. Oh no, we're gonna, all right. You are already here to the end, but I need you all, what we're gonna do right now is I'm gonna take a video of everybody. This is the end of the day, we need to do a little bit of energy. So what I want you all to do is to get up for just a moment, and I'm gonna do this kind of video, and I need you all to scream to the camera, because I'm gonna send it to TechCrunch Mashable, and you know what? We're gonna pretend you're on the 6 o'clock news. So everyone get up, everyone, come on. Yes, that's it. I'm so sorry, those of you who are sleeping in this beanbags. No, I'm not sorry. All right, I'm gonna start from this side and go to this side, all right? And so start screaming when I'm on your side, all right? 3, 2, 1, go! Come on, go! Yes, one more time! Yeah, all right. I just really wanted to do that. That was not planned. Mostly I know that I could just tell you to do almost anything. If I told you to do 1 foot, you probably would have. So this is going to be a slightly different presentation than most of the ones that I usually do. And so you're going to get some new stuff. I'm going to tell you a story I've never told on stage before. And so I'm going to tell you the story of how I pissed off Mark Zuckerberg. So you all know Mark Zuckerberg. You know his face and all that fun stuff. Now, I met Mark Zuckerberg in 2006 when I was in college at Northwestern. And this is actually a picture of me in 2006. I'm trying to look like a gangster or something. I don't really know. And so in 2006, I was training to be a resident assistant. I was going to teach the new freshmen how to live in a dorm, something like that. And I woke up one morning, and I saw that Facebook had launched this new thing called the news feed. Has anyone seen news feed before? Maybe? Yeah, it sounds like it, right? Now, I saw this thing, and it was brand new, and it had who broke up, who got together, and I didn't really like it. I was like, this is too much information. So I rolled out of bed, and I created a group called Students Against Facebook Newsfeed. And this is the actual group that I created in 2006. And I just told a bunch of internet friends, here, go invite some people to the group since you also don't like it. And then I went off to go train to be an RA. At about noon, 1 o'clock, sometime in September 2006, I got a phone call. It's like, Ben, are you near a computer? Ben. And I'm like, no, what's going on? He's like, there's 10,000 people in your group, Ben. And apparently, the group had gone viral through Facebook newsfeed. That very night, I was sitting in my dorm room. It's probably maybe a fourth of this stage tops. And there's 20 people crowding around me, and I'm in front of the computer, we're watching and refreshing at midnight as the number goes over 100,000 people. Now remember, this is Facebook at the time only had about 7.5 million users. And by the end of that week, the group had 750,000 people, which is 150,000 more people than Vancouver. Think about that. 10% of Facebook joined my silly group. And I started getting calls from the USA Today, from Good Morning America, from all the college newspapers, from international newspapers. My university didn't know what to do. They were like, what's going on? On that Friday, by the end of the week, after all the criticism, Mark put a blog post basically saying, we're sorry, we screwed up, and we're going to change it so that we add more privacy features, which is what my group originally requested. And so after that happened, I kind of thought, you know what? I won, I'm the winner. I love animated GIFs. Also, I'm legally required to have 1 cat and 1 dog in all my presentations. You think it's kidding, it's legal. Now, I thought I had won, but really what I learned over the long run is that Mark had won. And so I'm going to show you an email, or part of an email that I received that next week from Mark Zuckerberg. And I know you can't quite read it from here, but this is an actual email Mark sent to me on the 12th. And I haven't told Mark I was going to put this on. It'll be OK. Don't tell Mark, OK? But what basically he does, instead of the you're a terrible person, why are you screwing us up, he reaches out to me and asks me, how can we improve Facebook? Let me tell you what we're going to do next. Let me hear your feedback. And we had a phone call, and we had a chat, and we had an email chain. And this is how I first met Mark Zuckerberg. Fun side note, when I actually met him in person 2 years later as the editor of Mashable, when I first introduced myself to him, he just started laughing for about 5 minutes straight. He couldn't handle the fact that I was now the social media person at Mashable. So the lesson here the first lesson I want to give to here is that criticism feeds innovative leaders rather than deters them. And criticism is part of the fuel that makes innovative leaders even more innovative. They take it and they use it to build something better. Because if you're going to build something innovative, you're going to break a few eggs. The other question I want to answer, though, and so is this. Why has Zuckerberg's story captivated our attention? Why do we pay attention to a story like Zuckerberg's? And don't tell me that we don't pay attention to it. They made a movie out of it with this guy. I don't know if you've all seen that. But I thought a lot about this during my research for my book, Captivology. And one of the triggers in my book is something called the mystery trigger. And so in my book, Captivology, I talk about the 7 captivation triggers that captivate our attention across all psychological bounds. And I went through over 300 years of scientific research and attention and memory to understand why do we pay attention to people like Mark Zuckerberg or Sheryl Sandberg or Nikola Tesla, and how can we use what they have for our own lives, whether you're a musician, you're an artist, you're an entrepreneur, you are a teacher, you are a mom. Attention is the modern currency of the economy. Nothing gets done without attention. And so, again, the question being, why do we pay attention to Zuck's story? And part of the answer, I think, is because there's this storyline of how did he succeed, and what's the story arc, the mystery trigger. There's a mystery behind how he succeeded. And so there are 2 reasons, actually, scientifically, we pay attention to mysteries. One is something called the Zignarek effect. Now, in the 1950s, there was this woman named Bluma Zignarek. She was a Soviet researcher. According to legend, she was sitting down at a restaurant, and she was curious to the fact that the waiters could take her order, have a perfect view of her order, take it to the kitchen, and then completely forget it. And she wondered, why was that? And so what she did was she took a bunch of kids, and she took them and had them do puzzles like this one. But in half of the studies, she would have the kids, she would take the puzzles away from the kids halfway through. And so, that's kind of mean, right? And so weeks and months later, when she asked the kids about which puzzles they remembered, guess which one? The only ones that they remembered. The only ones they could remember were the ones that were incomplete. And so it's called the Zignarek effect because it is the fact that we pay attention and have a stronger memory for incomplete tasks and incomplete storylines. The second reason we pay attention to mystery scientifically is something called uncertainty reduction theory. And so let's pretend we're on a date, all right? You and I are on a date, first date, all right? What kind of questions are you going to ask me?
What do you like on Friday nights?
What do I like on Friday nights? That's a good first date question. And the first date kinds of questions are very surface level, right? Like, do you have sisters? Do you like dogs? Things like that. And the reason we ask these questions is because of something called uncertainty reduction theory. It is the fact that we dislike uncertainty in our lives, and our goals in interacting with new people is to reduce the amount of uncertainty in order to make a decision on whether or not to be with this person more. And dating is a perfect example. If you've ever used a dating app, I'm sure none of you have ever been on a dating app before, but you ask surface level questions to figure out, should I meet them or is this person a creep? And we do this all the time, not just in the people we meet, but in the mysteries and the stories we look for. When there is uncertainty in a storyline, we want to keep on listening. So it's kind of part of that Cinderella story that we like to hear and we like to listen about. Are they going to be able to achieve the big Cinderella moment, or are they going to fail? Now, one more story that I think really is captivating and shows the power of the mystery trigger is the story of my friends at Airbnb. So my friend Brian Chesky, the founder of Airbnb, years and years ago, Airbnb, the big, global company where you can rent houses, no one thought that you could do that. It seemed weird. It even seems weird now sometimes to think that somebody could rent a house and a stranger could be in your house. And the company was almost dead years ago. It was $100,000 in debt and credit cards, and they were about to close. But they had one last moonshot idea, and it was this. In 2008, they made cereal called Obama O's and Captain McCain's. Really, they did. And they produced a couple hundred boxes of these cereals, and they said, you can buy these cereals limited time only. And lucky for them, people actually bought it. And they were able to raise a couple $100,000 this way and keep the company alive. Just long enough for Paul Graham, the founder of the Y Combinator Accelerator, to invest money. And the reason he said he invested was because literally told them, you are like cockroaches, you do not die. And so my advice to you, be the cockroach. I mean, that's like the greatest cockroach, right? So I've been going through a lot. Let me tell you a little bit more about me and what we're going to be talking about more in depth. And so my name is Ben Parr. I got a lovely intro here. I used to be the co-editor and editor-at-large of Mashable, where I wrote over 2,400 articles on technology, media, and other topics, and I got to meet technology's greatest leaders and innovators. Since then, I wrote a book called Captivology, which I told you about, and I joined the advisory boards of Lufthansa and some awards, and most recently started a company called Octane AI, which allows you to build an audience on Messenger through a bot, Facebook Messenger. And Maroon 5, Lindsay Lohan, Aerosmith, Kiss, and other artists use us to communicate with their fans at scale. And in this presentation, I want to talk to you about two things. I want to talk to you about, one, what makes great innovators successful? And two, how do tech innovators capture our attention? And to talk about that, I want to go through the lens of these four topics: criticism, creativity, messaging, and empathy. Now, we've already covered one of these, so we're in good shape already. So I want to talk to you about the second one and how these innovators capture attention and how these innovators succeed. So let's talk about number two, which is creativity. Does anyone know who that guy is? Want someone scream it out? Go. Anyone? Wait, who? Miyamoto. All right. You're getting a prize. I don't know what prize you're getting. This is Shigeru Miyamoto. He is the creator of Zelda, Super Mario, Pikmin, and most of Nintendo's most iconic characters. He also looks like he's having a great time with the sword. I really want that. Now, back in the early days, he was tasked with creating a new character for a side-scroller game. And he only had 16 by 16 pixels to create a character. He didn't have 3D modeling. He didn't have any of those things. He only got 16 by 16 box to create a compelling character. And so, this is a thing that he told me in person when I interviewed him for the book. And so what he told me was this: we couldn't do hair. It's not enough pixels, but you could put a hat on him. And you can't see a small nose, so you have to give him a big nose. But you can't really tell it's a nose, so you need to put a mustache on him to show that it's a nose. And you really can't tell if you just did a t-shirt and jeans. You wouldn't be able to tell that. So what about overalls? You would actually be able to see that. And then you need to have bright colors like blue and red in order for people to know that this is a character. And this character is going to kind of have to be fat because you're only 16 by 16. And so through these restrictions, he was able to create Super Mario, one of the most iconic characters of all time. And so Mario now ranks as one of the two most recognizable characters in the world next to Mickey Mouse. And so the lesson here is that creativity flourishes under restraint. Most people think if you give people an open canvas, if you give an artist an open canvas, they'll come up with something beautiful. I disagree. You want to restrain the artist as much as you can to let them do something super creative. And it's not just me saying it. There's actually scientific research that shows it. So this is from a study that was done over at the University of Amsterdam. And what they would do is they would show them visuals like this. And in some of the studies, they would have a low auditory sound, someone mumbling things that were completely unrelated to the task of identifying the letters. And so the people who didn't have any of the auditory constraints would always say that it was A, H, E, and S, which is what you see what's composed of. But the people who had the auditory restraints and had the person mumbling in their head would usually say E, S, A, and H. And so what they found was that if you put constraints or you put some kind of block in the way, people became more creative. People were able to figure out new possibilities that they would never have seen before. They were more open to ideas. And so it's actually something where constraints expand our conceptual scope. And so the conceptual scope is our view of creativity, is our view of the kind of world. And so it's usually very narrow, but when you're constrained by something, say 140 characters on a tweet, or you are constrained by 16 by 16 pixels, you find more ways to be creative. My co-founder, Matt, and I actually do this exercise all the time, where when we're trying to brainstorm, we set a timer, and we brainstorm on different topics for only 90 seconds. And then we switch to a different topic after 90 seconds, and we don't go over that time, because in that short constraints, we come up with ideas under pressure that we would not have come up with otherwise. And so those constraints help create this creative outlet. Now, the second question, the captivology question, is why do we pay attention to creative people, to creative innovators? And from my research, I find that the answer to this is something I call the disruption trigger. And the disruption trigger is the fact that we pay attention to the people and things that violate our expectations of the world. And so a classic example, everyone know this guy? Yeah? No? Yeah, Old Spice guy. One of the most successful ad campaigns of the last 20 years. The Old Spice guy is a super creative campaign where every 5 to 10 seconds, something completely different happens. Diamonds come out of his hands. He's on a horse. He's fighting. Who knows what's happening? And it violates our expectations each time. But it does it in a really positive way. And this campaign actually helped Old Spice get back from a really low point where early on it was about to die because Axe body spray was eating its lunch. I don't know if you've ever seen an Axe body spray commercial, but it's basically sex in a can. That's the entire marketing strategy. And it works. But in the early days, Old Spice would actually try to copy it. And it completely failed. Because old is literally in Old Spice's name. It was like watching your grandpa try to ride a skateboard. It doesn't work. And so instead, what a new group, Wyden and Kennedy, did with Old Spice was equate old not with being out of style, but old with experience. Kind of like that confident, masculine older brother who knows about the world, kind of like the Old Spice guy. And a series of campaigns they did helped bring Old Spice back through this creativity and through disrupting our expectations. The most creative things tend to violate our expectations. But there is a caveat. Not everything works at not just, here's the thing. You can capture attention using the disruption trigger by running in here naked. I mean, I don't recommend it, but you can. And here's the thing, though. If you're trying to, for example, close a deal, you're not going to do that. And so let me give you another example of this in action. Let's see. Oh, no sound. So you see this? I'm going to just pretend. You don't even need to hear it. It is a group of off-key. Oh, there's here.
Eddie coupon box. Beware of paper cuts. Quiznos subs.
Quiznos. Toasty.
Okay, let's recap. What did we just watch? We just watched a commercial that some CEO approved where mutant rodents are dancing next to food, singing off-key. What the hell? Does it capture your attention? Oh, sure, violates your expectations. Did it help him sell more sandwiches? No, they went bankrupt a few years later. One more note on the creativity part. Now, raise your hand if you consider yourself a great multitasker. Raise your hand high. All right, you're all liars, every single one of you. There is no such thing as a good multitasker. Every piece of research shows that those who label themselves as heavy multimedia multitaskers are actually the least effective at completing tasks, completing them correctly, and completing them on time. And so the final lesson here on creativity is that creativity requires focus. You can't multitask creativity. It has to be a focused laser beam. You have to focus the scope. Number 3, messaging. To understand how the great innovators of technology message their products and ideas, I need to tell you about deodorant. Now, I'm sure all of you use deodorant, you smell lovely and all that fun stuff, but in the 1800s and the early 1900s, almost nobody used deodorants or antiperspirants. They existed, but no one used them. Instead, they used these things: dress shields, cotton pads and rubber stoppers in their armpits. Why, when these things existed, when deodorant and antiperspirant existed? Well, there were two issues that prevented its adoption. One, people of the early 1900s thought that it would kill you to use an antiperspirant, that it was unhealthy and unsafe. But the second and bigger thing was it was taboo to talk about. It was not ladylike, it was not Victorian to talk about any kind of bodily fluid or body odor. So nobody advertised about these products, and nobody knew about these products even existed. And so in early 1910s, there was a young entrepreneur. Her name was Edna Murphy, and her father was a surgeon. And during surgery, he created an antiperspirant for his hands because he didn't want to sweat during surgeries. And Edna, being a really smart person, was like, you know what? I can use this for my armpits. So she did, and then she turned it into a product, packaged it, got an investment from her grandfather, and she created Odor Oh No. That is literally the name of the product. And so she went out to market and sell Odor Oh No, but it didn't do very well in the beginning because of those two frames of reference I told you about earlier. And so she teamed up eventually with a guy named James Webb Young, who eventually became the first chairman of the Ad Council. And together, they tackled these two frames of references that were holding antiperspirants and Odor Oh No back. So, number one, how do you get people to realize you will not die using an antiperspirant? Well, a doctor invented it. So they advertised that fact hard. And this is an actual ad where they talk about how the leading skincare specialists and doctors recommend Odor Oh No. And they had an advertising campaign where they explained that. And when they did this, the sales of the product doubled. But that was still not enough. They still had the bigger issue of no one wanted to talk about antiperspirant deodorant. So they put out this very famous ad from 1919. Now, this ad is called Within the Curve of a Woman's Arm, a frank discussion of a subject too often avoided. And it's a very straightforward ad. It's basically like, you have body odor. That's okay. It happens. There's a product that fixes it. It's called Odor Oh No. Buy it today. That's the summary of the ad. But this ad in 1919 was the most controversial ad of its years. Hundreds of women canceled their Ladies' Home Journal subscriptions in protest of this ad that ran in Ladies' Home Journal. They were basically like this. I just like having Pixar things in my presentations. But it worked. Suddenly, the floodgates opened, and suddenly people understood that antiperspirants were a thing, and they could advertise it, and they could talk about it, and they could talk about body odor. And as a result, sales skyrocketed until years later, Edna Murphy was able to sell her company for millions. The lesson here is that innovators adapt their message, and they reframe the conversation. And so I call this the framing trigger. And this is another trigger from my research for captivology. And so the framing trigger is the fact that we pay attention to things that fall within our frame of reference and tend to ignore things that fall outside of it. A very classic example that we see right now is in politics. Now, I picked Trump and Obama for this one, but I actually have a very good Canadian friend who's worked for Harper, and I have a very hardcore Canadian friend who worked for Trudeau. And if I told them the same issues, they would have completely different responses, and only certain things they would listen to. And this is the power of the framing trigger, that we only pay attention to things that fall within our frames of reference. And it can be really hard to get people to pay attention to you and your ideas when it's outside of the frame of reference that they're used to. Now, how did Odor Oh No do it? Well, they were able to adapt to the frame of reference by talking about the fact that a doctor had made it and doctors recommended it. And they were able to reframe the conversation by making it okay to talk about body odor and bodily fluids, and thus okay to talk about antiperspirants. Great innovators find a way to frame their message in the right way. That is their power. Now, another question, the captivology question, is how do innovators create messages that are captivating? And the answer to that is that they frame themselves as experts. So, another study, by the way, I love studies. So this study comes from Emory University. These are actual brain scans from Emory University. And they had a study. Let's pretend this is the study group, all right? You're all going to be part of a study. And you're going to be asked to make decisions with your money, all right? And we're going to put some brain scanners on you. It's going to look great. You're going to look awesome. Now, if I'm asking you to make a decision with money and how to spend it, the critical thinking decision-making centers of the brain are going to light up, right? You're making a critical decision with your money. But now pretend I bring in an economics professor, an expert in economics, to come give you advice. The research shows that if I bring that expert in, the decision-making centers of your brain will shut down. It's as if you offload the processing power of your brains to the expert. And in this study, even when the expert, the economics professor, was clearly wrong and was clearly being too conservative with his advice, most of the students took the advice anyway because they weren't thinking critically. They were just listening to the expert. And there's a term for this. It's called directed deference. It is our incredible power to pay attention to experts and listen to them. Another example through science. So there was another study, and what they did, I love this study. They had people put on these coats, these doctor's coats. And in different studies, they would have them put coats or not coats on. And what they found was, when you put a doctor's coat on a person and you ask them to do tests, like attention tests, what would happen is that these people would score much higher on their tests. They'd have sharper focus, they'd be correct more often, they'd answer things faster. It was as if just the mere association of expertise created, actual attention. Now, the favorite part of the study is what they did also is they gave another group the same coat, but they told them it was a painter's coat. And they said, do the attention tests. And when they did these attention tests, their scores went down the crapper. The mere association of expertise or not expertise dramatically changed the results. And this is the power of what I call the reputation trigger, is the fact that we pay attention to reputable sources of information, more specifically experts. Another reason we pay attention to experts and why the innovators frame themselves as experts is because we trust experts explicitly. And so this is from the Edelman Trust Survey. They run this every year. And what you find is that every year, people rank as the most trustworthy spokesman for a brand, the academic or the expert, by more than 2/3, and the numbers increased over the years. You want to have an expert as the face of your company. Now, raise your hand if you're a CEO. Just raise your hand now. Right now, raise it high. Or maybe about 15, 20%. All right, awesome. I have advice for you. Do not be the face of a campaign for your company, no matter what, because the scores much lower for you. We do not trust CEOs as the face of our campaign. If you have to, find a way to be an expert and not a CEO. The only people that score worse are government officials. I'm sorry, I love you, Canadian government. Please don't hurt me. The lesson here is to become the expert, do the deep dive into the area you truly care about, and be known as the expert. That is the branding part of this. That is the attention part. Let people know and teach them through blog posts, through social media, through books, through whatever medium. Become the expert and share your expertise with others. This is exactly what Oder Ono did. They used experts, specifically doctors, to enhance the quality of their brand. And here is finally a quote from my friend Jeff Weiner. Jeff Weiner is the CEO of LinkedIn. He gave me this quote when I interviewed him for the book. In a world where there's an increasing amount of information, people turn to trusted brands. They turn to trusted people. Be one of those trusted people. All right. Last lesson. We're going to talk about empathy. Now, raise your hand if you're a married woman. Raise your hand high right now. Married women? All right, this study is for you. Yeah, you should giggle or be scared. All right. There was a study, and what they did was they took married women and they put them into rooms alone, and they stuck electrodes to their ankles to see how much pain they could tolerate. This was a real study. And they divided these women into 3 different groups. Condition 1, married woman had to sit alone in a room with electrodes strapped to her ankles. Condition 2, married woman could hold the hand of a stranger. And condition 3, married woman could hold the hand of her husband. And so what they found, unsurprisingly, is that the people who felt the most pain, the women who felt the most pain, were the married women who had to sit alone in a room. And the reason for this is because they had nowhere to redirect their attention to. The women who felt the least amount of pain were the women who could hold the hands of their husbands. Not surprising, but they found a secondary correlation they didn't expect. They found a correlation between the strength of the marriage and the amount of pain these women felt. The stronger their marriage, the less pain they felt. The power of love literally overcame the power of pain. And so the lesson is that we pay attention to the people and things who pay attention to us. And this is called the acknowledgement trigger. And the acknowledgement trigger is the fact that we pay attention to the people and things who pay attention to us, and specifically provide us with empathy and understanding. And it's not just people, it's actually brands. And so this comes from the Lady Geek Global Empathy Index, where they do an empathy index using a lot of different data to figure out what are the most empathic companies, both internally and externally. And if you look at this list, 5 of the top 10 are technology companies. Technology companies typically rank higher on the empathy index because they both treat there's a multitude of reasons, but they tend to have a better brand affinity, and they tend to have more perks for their people, and they tend to be more empathic all across the board. And these are also, not coincidentally, some of the most valuable companies in the world. There is a correlation. And so this kind of leads me back to what Mark Zuckerberg did with me. Zuckerberg, instead of yelling at me and being defensive after I screwed up his entire week, actually reached out to me and was empathic and was asking me for advice and was asking me to give feedback. And that's always been the way Zuckerberg has done things when he's had a controversy. He's actually reached out and he's been empathic. Now, the great brands and the great innovators, they're empathic, not just externally to their audience, but also internally. And I think another way that you see that with Mark is through his second in command, Sheryl Sandberg, the author of Lean In. And she is super focused on creating a better work culture internally, especially for women and minorities. And it's helped make Facebook one of the most valuable companies in the world. And look, I know that you may think there are certain exceptions, if you've seen the news at all. But here's the thing. In the long run, if you're not empathic and your company isn't empathetic and you aren't empathetic, it will burn you at some point. And we've seen this time and time again. The more empathetic you are, the more attention you command, the better your company is, the more that you can do, and the more innovative you can be. So, another question. How do innovators build acknowledgement? And the answer is that they demonstrate empathy at scale. And so I learned this lesson when I interviewed these 2 people. I don't know if you recognize them. I actually saw the one on the right yesterday in South by Southwest in Austin. So this is Dr. Thomas Dazin-Gotita and Adrian Grenier from the TV show Entourage. Now, they may seem like an odd couple, but I interviewed both of them together because they did a documentary together called Teenage Paparazzo, which is a great documentary, by the way. And it follows a teenage paparazzi as he's taking photographs of all the celebrities. And Adrian uses it as a lens to understand, why are we so obsessed with celebrities? Why do we care about celebrities or government officials or the Queen or whatever you're obsessed with? Why does a celebrity culture exist, especially in the US? And we talked for an hour and we realized that the answer to this is because celebrity and the celebrities we care about are in some way a reflection of ourselves. They are a reflection of the tribe in which we belong to. By the way, I told you, puppy. I am legally required to have at least 1 puppy in my presentation. Now, it says something about you and the tribe you belong to if you're a fan of Beyonce, Taylor Swift, or Sheryl Sandberg. It says something about you and your values and your beliefs. And there's actually a term for all of this scientifically. It's called the parasocial relationship. It is our capability to feel a 2-way relationship with somebody, even if we only have a 1-way relationship with them. Now, an example of this is Taylor Swift. So Taylor Swift does a thing every Christmas called Swiftmas, where she literally stalks her fans, kind of creepy actually, and she figures out exactly what they want, and then she sends them gifts, and then they do videos where they unbox it. Hello, sleeping people on this side. Oh, they're not sleeping, that's awesome. Now, what happens is that these videos go viral because it's awesome. She's sending gifts to a couple of her fans. But what she realizes is that if she sends gifts to a few of her fans, she's showing that she cares about her entire audience. And her entire audience understands that she cares about them, and she cares about them without needing to send a gift to every single one of them. I actually told the story a little bit earlier today. My friend Gary Vaynerchuk once, he saw, someone tweeted at him, "I need eggs," just for no reason at all. And Gary Vaynerchuk is like a best-selling author. And Gary said, how many do you need? What's your address? And in about 2 hours, he sent an entire crate of eggs to this guy who had asked for eggs. And it went viral because everyone's like, that's crazy, that's awesome. And he showed empathy and he showed acknowledgement at scale. Because by showing that he would do this for one, he's showing that he could do it for all of them. And that is the parasocial relationship in action. It's also not just for celebrities and people, it's also for brands. Apple, for example, is a master at this, where unlike most startups, which have to claw their way to attention, Apple just says we have a product and then there's a line outside the door. That is the power that Apple has because they've built long-term attention and long-term empathy, and you build a value and a parasocial relationship with their products and with their ideas. So the lesson here, validate your audience. And one way to do that is to enable participation. One of my favorite sites is Kickstarter. Anyone ever donated to Kickstarter before? All right, awesome. Someone has a Kickstarter here. Go donate to his or her Kickstarter. Yeah, I know. Now, Kickstarter. Think about what Kickstarter actually is. Kickstarter is the world's slowest e-commerce website ever. I order a product, and within 6 to 18 months, maybe I get it and maybe I don't. It's actually terrible when you think about it. And yet, it's super popular and it works super well because it's not just you buying a product, it's you participating in the creation of an entrepreneur's dream, of a new thing to come into the world, of a new game, of a new idea. You are participating in its creation, and you feel acknowledgement, and you feel a deeper connection and a deeper understanding. That's the power of acknowledgement. It makes us use the worst e-commerce website in the world. Now, I've gone through a lot of information here. I want to recap a little bit of it and close this out. So if you remember through these 4 lenses, criticism, creativity, messaging, and empathy, the great leaders find a way to take criticism in and make their products more innovative and better. They find a way to do creativity through restraint and through the restrictions that their world has given them. They find a way to frame the message of their products in a way that will resonate with the world, especially when the world is not ready for it. And they find a way to be empathic, not with just their brands, but with themselves and internally. And I also reviewed a couple of the scientific triggers that capture our attention. There are actually 7. I only was able to talk about 5 of them today. If you want to learn about all 7 in depth, I hear there's an awesome book that you can buy on Amazon and other websites. I'm legally required by HarperCollins to also pitch the book at least once in a presentation. But I want to answer one last question before we close everything out, which is this: why do innovators even matter? And so I was looking up some stats about British Columbia, and I was looking up some stats about Vancouver, and what I found was that there are over 100,000 people who work in technology in the region. That is more than oil plus mining plus forestry combined. But more importantly, the average technology worker makes 57% more than the average worker in the BC area. And what I think that means, among other stats, is that technology and innovation create a better world for both us and for the people that the technology impacts. I think that's why all of you are in the room, because the stuff that you're building, the stuff that you're working on, the stuff you're collaborating on is helping the world in some way at scale. Companies like Facebook and Tesla and SpaceX improve the world in some way, in a way that was never thought possible even just a few years ago. And one of you, or several of you, or maybe all of you, will have the chance to do that through the work that you do, and help create happy kids like that, and create a world where that is more equal. I think, thank you. I think that technology is part of that, is the thing that can help equalize the world, that can help make the world a better place, that can help us create a better world through these scaled interactions, through empathy at scale. And so keep on building, just like building a bonfire. You have to start with that spark, that idea, and build it up, get the kindling, get that idea, start building it, whether you're at a big company or at a small company, and turn it into a bonfire that captures everybody's attention and does good in the world. And with that, I want to say thank you for your attention.
Great job, Ben. That was a ton of fun. And I'm going to read your book.
Thank you
I'm going to read your book. I love your energy.
My phone. Let me get my
Your phone? Do you want,
I'm going to post that video now.
You want a picture?
Oh, yeah, let's do that.
No, you got to unlock it.
No. Here's what we do. We're going to do a selfie with everybody, the two of us, all right? You're going to all get in the back with us. Is that all right? Come on. We're going to do a selfie, everyone. All right. Selfie time. Get in there. Ready? Come on, guys. Get in. 5, 4, 3. Oh, good job. 2, 1. Nice. Good job, everyone.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
That was great.